was the purposeful sampling. To ensure that teachers are honored for implementing the revised Tennessee standards presented in a way that promotes higher reading comprehension and math proficiency. So if you think about that second bullet, we really want to be mindful that the practice of the portfolio can not only be a professional learning tool, but that it's also a way to celebrate and to be able to be in front of our students and teach and learn in ways that are very deep in depth of knowledge and integrated skills. So if you think about the portfolio itself and the components, pre-K portfolio and the kindergarten portfolio are both very similar to what you see on the screen, except the content within the collections is different. So as you see, each portfolio has a total collection number of 4. There are 2 ELA collections and there are 2 math collections, and today, of course, we are focusing on the math. We will focus on the ELA in mid-July and also provide those resources then. The math portfolio for pre-K and K for 17-18 looks very similar to the guide that was provided in 2016-17 for those who implemented the portfolio as an opt-in model. As you see on the screen, the 2 collections in math, one collection is counting and cardinality, and the other collection is geometry or measurement and data for pre-K. Again, the structures are exactly the same as pre-K with 4 collections, 2 in ELA and 2 in math. And in kindergarten, the math collections are counting and cardinality, and the second collection is operations and algebraic thinking. In a few moments, when we take a closer look at the guide itself, we'll walk through how we actually choose the standards that we will use to demonstrate one of these collections. So thinking about the overall structure of the portfolio, we use the visual that you see on the screen in all of our early learning model trainings this year. I'm not going to take a deep dive into this, but please know that when other resources are released in July, this is definitely a place that we will revisit and provide additional support around. But as you can see, it's just a visual of 4 different collections. And each cloud you see there is a standard that drives that collection. And then underneath the cloud, you see 3 students. So you total of 12 across, but there are 3 students in each collection. So what I'd like for you to think about right now, just for context, is to just focus in on 2 of those clouds. Let's just look at the last 2. This demonstrates the portfolio for 16-17. But the cloud that's in the 2, well, the third one and the fourth, if you start counting from the left, demonstrate math. See, there are 3 students. One represents the differentiated purposeful sampling of those students who are in the emerging range. There's also a student who, through purposeful sampling, demonstrates the differentiated group for the proficient levels of students, and you'll also see that for the advanced. So enter into the work with the math scoring guide today. Just please be aware that these structures around purposeful sampling, we will take a deeper dive into that in mid-July when the other resources are released. It's also important today as we think through the math guide. Remember the most essential part of the portfolio. And you know, just speaking from the heart, my experiences with portfolio, everything from my first year of teaching when I collected student work and kept it in file folders and shared it with parents at parent conferences and conference with students around it. It's really that same driving force that drives the portfolio model that we're going to talk about today when we look at the math guide. It's all about looking closely at student work, and it is student-centered above all. So one of the best parts of the visual you see right here is at the top arrow it says teacher developed. And what makes a portfolio model, a student growth portfolio model, actual portfolio model is that it is teacher developed. It is empowered by teachers. It reflects feedback from teachers. It is completely driven by teacher voice. And so the math guides that we dive into today, I mentioned earlier that they're very similar to the 16-17 math guide for the portfolio, and the reason that is the case is because the revised math standards had limited revisions to the math standards prior to 17-18 that we're implementing next year. The guide that we walk through is very similar because the standards have remained very similar. The other thing to think about as we go through today is even in this hour that we are together for this webinar, we are experiencing professional learning and growth just by talking about the standards, thinking about how we think about standards, thinking about how we will plan and teach and gather student work. And so that's a really important mindset to have going into the work. You'll see today that it's flexible because we'll see the different options, the different collection options that are within the math guide. We will not be diving deep into the peer review process today, but it is a driving force of the portfolio. More information will be provided later. And ultimately, all of the points that we just discussed go back to the fact that it is completely student-centered, and the student growth portfolio model can really take us all along a journey where we experience ahas with students, we see growth, we're mindful of what their work shows us, and we want to keep that in mind today as we continue forth. So I just shared before, you can see that there's several, and we're having a little malfunction here, so we will get back, but I'm going to keep talking as tech support fixes that. Let's just see what you saw on your screen. We're bullet points around the important points that we want to remember with the portfolio. So keeping in mind that it's actually an approach that's very similar to action research. So if we think about what you did see on the screen there, it all begins with intentional planning, which is often long-term planning that we do with our PCs in our school settings. It's a great opportunity for teachers to collaborate along with coaches, teacher leaders, principals, and be able to look forth through the year to see when standards will actually be taught and show up in a natural way of teaching. Another big piece here that you see is you'll see this idea of students making their own goals and assessing their growth along the way. So when we set up our own classrooms to be based on student work, it's a very natural progression that students begin to look at their own work as well. Metacognition develops and self-reflection develops. And ultimately, as teachers in our professional learning, the more that we know about standards, deconstructing standards, and then building them back up together in an integrated way, or even in a single way, as it is in math, ultimately, the greatest reward is that it goes back to being student-centered and that we can truly find the authentic strengths and areas of need in individual students. So as we dive into the math guide today and the way it's structured, keep in mind that it's through that process, it's through that close look at standards and where our students are performing along the way that we truly begin to differentiate in a way that matters for students. So one other piece today that's important to think about when we dive into the guide very soon is that the portfolio is based on a point A and a point B. Again, not for all students, as you saw from the visual earlier, but it's a teacher being empowered to choose those students that represent a differentiated group, which is a purposeful sampling. But one that's critical in this process, and again, I'm going to continue talking as tech support gets this thing back up, but one thing that's critical is that the point A and point B reflect the progression of the standards that are being taught within the schools. And so today when we look at the math scoring guide, we're mindful to think about, where in my school year does this particular standard show up naturally? So this helps us to think about the portfolio as not a pre-assessment, not a student assessment, but more about a teacher's impact on student growth from a point A to a point B. And so we will provide more guidance around this also as the summer progresses. This is a fun, to me, a very fun part of the talk around portfolios. I know in my own experiences and time that I planned with my colleagues, and we had collaborative thinking and reflecting about the greatest impact we could have on students with what we were teaching and when we were teaching and how we were teaching. That's definitely a message that we want to continue to send as we dive deeper into the portfolio. So today when we look at the math guide, you may also have questions in your mind that come up around possible evidence. And we will continue to provide work and webinars around this as well. We've been hard at work on collecting student samples that we can share with teachers and districts. So please just know that so much of the standards and the way they roll out in the scoring guide actually tell us what the best evidence collection might be. If we look carefully at what the standard is asking students to show or do, we might find that an audio or an actual image of the work or video might best support that work. And we're not going to dive into this either, but just to be mindful that the collection of the work, we're working with districts and teachers and always happy to answer questions around the best place to collect work, hold the collected work, such as Google Drive and other places that you might already have developed with your teams and your schools for to store student work. And as we walk through the math guide today, when we think about professional learning and we think about looking at student work, those of you who have attended the ELM trainings this year, narrative has been a very large piece of that, but we are now transitioning into saying narrative is also anecdotal notes, it's descriptions of work, it's all those professional learning decision points by teachers as they are observing students, they are analyzing student work, they are differentiating, they are progressing with students as they differentiate and students are showing growth. So please know that as we look at the guide today, so much of the success of the portfolio model truly is dependent upon a teacher's self-reflection and willingness to self-reflect with colleagues around what the student work is showing and how we're tracking that. So I know that there is a rubric, there's a scoring rubric that's 7 levels, and we're briefly see and talk about that through the math guides today. So I'll hold off until we actually see that in action in a few minutes. And there will be a platform where we load our work up, and more information again in July will be provided on that as well. I always show this picture again right before we dive into the teacher effectiveness as we close this portion before we dive into the guide. If you remember, it's purposeful sampling, it's differentiated groups in a collection. One student is chosen by the teacher to demonstrate that differentiated sample. And as you look at the screen right now, the teacher effectiveness indicator, if you take your eyes to level 3 at expectations, as we look back at this screen once again, if you look at the far right, let's start at the choose strand at the far right, and you see advanced student there with a black shirt on and a little black spiky hair, if that student started at a level 4 and to a level 6, there's steps between a 4 and a 6. So this particular student and that particular standard collection would have shown 2 levels of growth, which would place the teacher at a level 4. So as you hit level 4, students demonstrated on average approximately 2 levels of student growth. So it will provide more explicit information about this as we dive deeper into the portfolio over the summer and provide great support around understanding this particular indicator. This has not changed since 2016-17. We will go into 17-18 using the same teacher effectiveness indicator. That helps us keep in mind that for the portfolio, we often get questions around observation and if it still plays a role. Yes, it does. observation, the qualitative portion of evaluation is 50%. The portfolio is the growth measure at 35%, and the 15% achievement measure completes that evaluation circle. So pause now. We're right on time, and I'm going to ask you just to take a little bit of a private think time, and you can send questions to Amanda via the chat box, but I also have some questions that have been presented to me that have already been sent, and so I'm going to address those now. The first question that was sent to Amanda says, will pre-K and K both have the same collections this year as in all the standards? So if I answer this, answer it, and it's not exactly what you were hoping for this question, please read and ask again. But as we just saw a few moments ago, the collections are the same, and they reflect the small revisions that were made in the math standards for the year, but the collections themselves do remain the same. We also received a question that as follows. Are the suggestions for evidence types set in stone? Does the teacher have the flexibility to be creative with evidence collection? I love that question. I think that this is a great question. It shows a lot of growth mindset there and thinking about the best ways that we can demonstrate growth. One way to think about it and one guideline to keep in our mind that we definitely want that artifact, that student work artifact for the portfolio to be an artifact. Sometimes we think of evidence as being a teacher's description of the work or teacher checklist or those teacher notes around student work. The evidence here that we're talking about is definitely a student work artifact, which most often can be demonstrated through an image, an audio, or video. So I think the adaptations to keep in mind would just be, can I see it, can I hear it? It is a student work artifact that was submitted in such a way that I can actually see or hear the students actually demonstrating that standard. Another one that came through says, can school systems still have the option to let the 35% trump the 15%? So those are great evaluation questions, and just to kind of stay on track today, we're definitely going to follow up with all of the evaluation percentage questions, and everything still stands the same as it has been in the previous year as far as evaluations go. And definitely reach out if you have specific questions about your district to portfolio questions at tn.gov or to me directly at keeley.potter@tn.gov, and we can definitely have further conversations about this as well. And we were also asked, will the PowerPoint be emailed to us? The PowerPoint will actually be uploaded to the TEAM website, team-tn.org, so that those who could not participate today can also have access. We also have one more question popping up before we dive in, and this might actually be answered in the next section, so we're going to wait on that. All right, so thanks for continuing to be here with us. Again, as we enter into the actual pre-K and kindergarten mathematics scoring guide, please continue to send those questions to Amanda Armstrong's chat box, and she will continue to write them up. And we will have another pause for questions time in just a few minutes. Okay, so as we get our minds ready for math, again, it's almost like I need to pause myself for a second and take some private think time, get my head ready for math. Again, we've talked briefly about ELA and the stronger instructional shifts, the heavier revised ELA standards, but in math, again, the structure of the previous state standards has been maintained because it's logical, informative, and easy to follow, so there's the revisions are very minimal, and most Tennessee teachers are already familiar with the structure of the standards as they have been in the past. Just a moment ago, someone sent in a question about vocabulary. What we are really encouraging districts to do, if you are a district administrator or supervisor that's on the webinar, if you're a teacher or a coach on the webinar, really diving into the Tennessee math standards as they can be found online, the revised standards. And we do have links that are in this webinar that can be provided. You will see in-depth instruction and description around the vocabulary associated with math. And one of the reasons it's very important to wrap our heads around that vocabulary is when we are talking about collaborative work with our colleagues, speaking the same language is critical. So we highly recommend that you take advantage of those guides that are on right now and the upcoming standards trainings that are being provided, and I think starting on June 19th. So, what is the mathematics scoring guide? And I know we have a lot of terminology here that's fairly new to many of us, and so we'll continue in all the resources we provide to break these words down to make sure that everyone has the same idea about the vocabulary. But the Mathematics Scoring Guide is a standards-based tool that identifies the criteria and descriptors of each performance level and will be used to score student work artifacts for math. And in just a moment, we'll see what that looks like in the guide. So this part of the webinar, I know that the words are small on your screen, but this is actually the page that was released with the math resource guide to the pre-KK math portfolio. And we felt it was important to actually just include those pages so we could do a think aloud so that when you actually look at your own, or you might have it with you now, that it comes to life and makes sense to you and that you can process through it. So the Pre-KK Math Portfolio Resource Guide, the page that you see now is a resource page. It takes you through just an overview, general information about the Pre-KK portfolio, and you'll also see the links in blue that will actually guide you through this document. It will keep you within the document and take you exactly where you would like to go. So we highly recommend that this page be reviewed. And the second page of the introduction to the math guide includes some steps of the portfolio process. And so the portfolio work is dependent upon the planning and the collaboration and the analysis of the collaboration of the planning, really putting a focus on collecting student work and differentiating instruction accordingly, and then monitoring that again and diving back into the process. And so we've provided some steps here that districts might find useful as they approach the thinking process of their own team and leading their district through this. So it's very much about learning collaboratively. The first bullet is encouraging us all to create a long-term instructional plan. Once done that, breaking apart, deconstructing those standards so that we understand what we're teaching, and that helps us be more clear in how we teach students and differentiate for students. And the third bullet you see is reminding us of the scoring guide itself, because today the scoring guide will show you that there is a performance level scoring guide that provides the teacher a way to be able to actually score a student work, to know where they are at a point A. The fourth bullet, collect point A work at the most appropriate time. So again, in my mind, as I think about this, what I'm hearing is long-term planning. Once I have long-term plan, I think about where those standards are going to show up in my long-term planning that I might be able to pull from the scoring guide. And okay, so now I've got that, done some work with that. Then it's a good time to kind of dive into that scoring guide and see how the scoring guide presents that standard. And then an actual cycle of teaching and learning this idea of collecting point A work at the most appropriate time. The portfolio is a portfolio. Any language in any time, as long as portfolio has existed, it's a collection of work and it's a mindset. And we encourage everyone to not just limit themselves as teachers to think about what I have to collect for the scoring guide. It's really more about doing this all the time, and that it becomes a way you do business, and you're constantly taking your next steps of instruction according to what the students show you they need according to their own needs or strengths. And once once that cycle has begun, for those, for that standard or that collection that you just, or standard within the collection decide might actually be the formal collection that you use in the point A, this is one of the best parts. You have all your student work, and then you begin the sorting process and really thinking about which students, according to their peers in your classroom, show great strength within the standard, and those who are meeting the expectations just right where they should be, and then for those students who need additional scaffolds, who need additional coaching or small group differentiated instruction. That process is critical because now you've identified those purpose sampling groups that represent the differentiated groups. And so those are your point A labeled students. The work is what is lives within one of those differentiated groups. So then after the actual standard is taught, and people ask a lot how long is appropriate for time to lapse between point A and point B. There is no answer for that because some standards lend themselves to take months of instruction, and some standards lend themselves to be a much shorter amount of time. So it really goes back to keeping in mind about that authentic instruction, and that truly is how we should approach point A and point B. So when point B is gathered, the analysis begins. And again, we encourage you to do this as part of your practice all the time, whether it's with your colleague that's next door or if it's with a formal PLC or at a grade level meeting, that you're constantly looking at student work to drive instruction. But for the portfolio purpose, for a collection that you might be considering that might actually be the collection you submit, it's really important to analyze the growth between point A and point B to determine which samples demonstrate the most growth within those differentiated groups. And so once that's been done, the scoring guide becomes guide to identify the growth. So wherever the student was at point A, you have that documentation, and then the scoring guide allows you and gives you to be able to identify point B, and then there's growth in between. These are not submitted until April, and so again, it's the heart of the portfolio. It's the work of the portfolio. It's the practices. It's a portfolio frame of mind. The actual submission isn't actually in springtime, where teachers make those specific deliberate decisions about which students are going to be submitted for their differentiated work samples. So all in your resource guide, again, we've talked a lot about collaborative work, and you see the pre-kindergarten and the kindergarten planning guides here. There are many districts out there who do a lot of collaborative planning together, and I could see these growing into possibly a much larger document, but the scaffolds here for our thinking really lie just in the labels. And so first of all, you see standard highlighted. The reason it's highlighted is because the original math source guide that was sent out on the first day said standards and not standard, and we wanted to be clear that ELA is an integrated approach, but unless it is a standard, unless the revised standards place certain standards together, they will be separate. So even though in the math vocabulary it says cluster, that's not referring to the clustering that some people will use when we talk about ELA. We're calling those options and combinations, but I've still heard a lot of people refer as clusters. And as there are not clusters of standards, but cluster is a very important vocabulary word to know because it's one of the ways that the math revised standards are labeled. So here on this you see point A, date. You can actually track the date of point A, what the task was, describing that, and taking many notes and placing thoughts down so it's not forgotten. That's going to be critical. Point B date and point B task. Those students that were emerging proficient and advanced. So there's many different ways to do this, but we wanted to just provide some framework in your minds on thinking about how to begin to structure what that planning might look like. So pause now, and I'm going to read a few of the questions that have been sent to Amanda. And please continue to send those questions, and any that we do not get to today, we will definitely email those answers out. One question is, will there be level 5 examples for us to use? If so, where can we find those examples? So we will be providing some samples of what different levels look like, when all those resources are sent out, this will be a supplement that can be provided for math. And when we dig through the guide today, we still would like to place the emphasis on the idea that it truly is the work of deconstructing the standard, and doing that in collaborative ways with our colleagues will truly take us to the place in our mind where we know what the best examples might look like, but we will certainly provide some examples for you at a later time. So we're going to dive into the next part. We're actually going to go into the score guide. We're right on time here. We're going to take a closer look here. So I'd like to tell you how this is organized first. And so just like we do with our students when we take a book walk so that they know what's coming, I'm going to take a little book walk with you for just a minute, and then I'm actually going to go back to the screen. So the way that we've organized this webinar is what you see on this page is the actual standard as it is written in the revised math guide. And then the next page is going to be how that standard looks and is represented in the actual math scoring guide. Then we go to the next screen, we see the standard again as it is in the revised math guide, and then we see it in the scoring guide. The reason we feel it's really important to do that is because ultimately it is the standard. It is a standards-based collection, and notice these are single standards. They are not integrated standards. So we talked earlier about the title of the collection. So this is Pre-K Counting and Cardinality, which is knowing number names and the count sequence. And so again, at the bottom, each standard stands alone and is not integrated in the math scoring guide. So when we look at this represented on the next page, the first thing I want to think about aloud is that there's a highlighted portion next to PKCC3. It says unable to demonstrate the relationship. That is one of the few revisions we made. The original version did not say unable, and so we added that part, and we want to make sure that we have the correct version in your hands. Again, it's on team-tn.org, and we'll continue to send it out as much as possible. So, but here's how my thinking goes. So we thought approaching this webinar, the best way to do it was, I'm going to look at this really as a lens, through the lens of a teacher, and think about what this means to me, and think about how this informs my thinking around the way that I score the work, how it informs my own content knowledge about a standard. So I'm going to start with the PKCC2, and the most important critical part that all I must do is I'm going to have my eyes just go and land on the 3. So the 3 is the standard, and that's why we're providing the standard page before. So the 3 is the standard, and it says verbally counts forward in sequence from 1 to 30. Notice the continuum above and below the 3. So I won't read those to you, but you can see the varying degrees of that standard. 1 and 2 representing that the student work does not show the standard as it's written. 4 and 5, level 4 and 5 are the bridge to 6, because level 6 is actually the following year's standard. We need to be able to show growth, and those students who performed at point A at a level 4 or 5, we wanted to show growth outside of just metacognition, and we actually wanted to be able to demonstrate skill growth too, so it was more objective. So the 6 and 7 have been added, And we are definitely not encouraging that standards from the grade level be taught. This is about teaching those standards. This is about assessing where the student is in their own learning around a standard. So we wanted to make sure that we shared that point. It's a very critical point. And so if a student is in at point A at a level 2, verbally counts forward in a sequence from 1 to 10. If a student was not able, the student work did not show 1 to 30, then I would naturally go down to the 2 because they were solid in the 1 to 10, even beyond, but did not make it to the 30. So I've just demonstrated is just my thinking around what the actual words say. And this is a fairly simple one to read, and others get a little more complicated. But what's also important to think about is not only that, but I'd like to also leave in mind that the portfolio scoring guide is not about achievement. So it truly is about growth. So the goal is not, well, as teachers, we want our students to grow as much as possible, but we don't use this tool to ensure that we make sure that all students in our classroom reach the level 3 level. This is truly about differentiation, recognizing the performance level of a point A, and then being able to use this guide and our content knowledge around it, then determine point B and find the growth. I'll walk you through. You see counting and cardinality here. We continue with counting and cardinality standards, as you see here. And the next page of the scoring guide is the visual you see on the screen. Again, you've got counting and cardinality. The cluster is to count to tell the number of objects, but your individual standards measured, PKCC 4A, PKCC 5. I want to notice with me on PKCC 5, and we will continue to provide professional learning and support around what it actually means to have guidance and support. So as you see on level 3 on PKCC 5, the guidance and support counts to answer how many questions about as many as 10 things arranged in a line, or as many as 5 things in a scattered configuration. Given a number from 1 to 10, count out that many objects. That'd be thinking for me as a teacher if I'm looking at it. And we want to go back to the process of the portfolio. Imagine the benefits that I can receive in my own teaching and instruction by collaborating with my colleagues around what are these parts, what will this look like. And the idea that with our PLCs or our grade teams or our teaching partner next door, the more that we can gather work and analyze it together against the words on this performance-based scoring guide, the more accurate we will be in identifying those performance levels. So that's the thinking and the heart and the process of the portfolio. When we think about examples of what that looks like, that's where the complication lives as well, because it looks different for every student. But there's many parts here that are very critical for me to think about. Guidance and support counts to answer how many. To count tells me that I have to demonstrate that. How can I show that the student counted? How can I show that it's about as many as 10 things arranged in a line? Some of those could become images, but the act of counting out would be demonstrated in audio or video as far as being able to see and hear that student and to do that. So again, we have one more, counting and cardinality for pre-K, as you see on the screen in front of you now. And again, we have the same structure, levels 1 to 7. And again, looking at the teacher's lens, level 3 uses comparative language such as more or less than or equal to compare and describe collections of objects by matching. I can already visualize my instruction with students, and the progression is going to happen from point A to point B as we dive into the talk around more and less, comparing and describing. Student talk and building that student talk in classrooms is truly a huge part of the portfolio process as well, because especially in our pre-KK students, that's one of the ways that they show us what they know. So pre-K, there's measurement and data standards, and again, you see the standards listed here. They are in the revised guide, and they see them here as they are in the scoring guide. So you've got PKMD1 and PKMD3, again, levels 1 to 7. Definitely diving in. I know what I'm doing as a teacher. I'm diving into the standard and the verbiage, the ideas, the concepts. I'm really going to deconstruct that and think about my planning and what that's going to look like and sound like when I'm a student. Continue through the pre-K guide. We move to the geometry standards, and again, knowing that there was an or in the collection, so this is allowing that flexibility. If I chose to choose one of the geometry ones, I might choose PKG1, might choose PKG2. Pre-K, with geometry standards, we also have PKG4 and G6, which you see here in the guide, with several. Then as we're going to pause just for a moment and answer a few questions and then dive into the kindergarten in much a similar way. So here's a question. Yes, to review the rationale behind the 7-level scoring guide. The 7-level scoring guide really came about from feedback from teachers who implemented the pre-KK portfolio as an opt-in model. It really goes back to the idea and concern that they had around showing the growth of those students who at point A demonstrate an advanced performance level. So if a student were to enter into the scoring guide at a level 5, in the past, the only way to measure growth was through metacognition, a demonstration of metacognition, and that's still an area that we are working towards as educators, especially in pre-KK, to demonstrate that, what it looks like and sounds like. So we want to still continue to promote that, but at the same time, the level 6 and 7 allow for growth to be shown for those students who enter in already at an advanced level at point A. Another question that we have, we hear this a lot. Pre-K teachers are usually the only ones in their building, so collaboration is more difficult. How do you suggest they do this cross-country? We're working diligently also to share messages with district leaders and around the importance of ensuring that collaborative groups are definitely matched up within districts. But some districts are really small, and that can be a difficult task as well. So one of the things that we hope to provide as well this year will just be some ongoing virtual check-ins. You will not be alone. So we are definitely encouraging districts to foster that type of learning environment where you can even team up with kindergarten teachers within your building, because you're still going to be doing the work around looking at student work and deconstructing standards. Also, just seeking it out as well, and just through a teacher's lens, their own advocate, and seeking out even in other districts some virtual relationships, which we will definitely support you in. So I'm very interested in being able to provide that support. So that's something that we'll continue to strive towards. So as far as any questions about the platform is definitely going to provide structures and scaffolds, but we feel really strongly that the practices that we've walked through today, just those general best practices of driven instruction and differentiation, that is where the heart lies. The documentation template is really just for planning that we provided today, and when you submit to the platform, It will be a very simple process. All of that training will be provided through tutorials, and we'll continue to provide information around that. But we do ensure you that it will be a simple process and that much support will be provided. We'll also include in the administrative guide, there's lots of questions about what should I include in my evidence description, what should I not. We will take a deep dive in the guide that we put out, and it will share expectations around should you put your name or should you not put your name, and so all of those portions we will definitely make explicit in the guide. So we're definitely working hard every day to make sure that we're already developing that so that teachers can feel good about that. So we're back into the kindergarten, and I won't go through it at such a slow rate since we just went through pre-K, but what we do want to notice is how the collections are represented in kindergarten. So again, one collection is counting and cardinality. You see 3 standards on this page, and you see how they're represented in the guide. As you notice, there's a highlighted place that is another slight revision made after the release of this. So if you do not have the most current version, again, it's on the team website, team-tn.org, and you can definitely find that there. So again, you see the 7 levels. You see the same needs that show up as we look at the levels, knowing that it's really important for me to think about what this looks like and sounds like for students, which are tricky in the standards, which ones I should really break apart. The more content knowledge I can develop around the standard itself will truly inform the way that I look at this performance-based scoring guide for kindergarten. Again, counting and cardinality, we have another isolated standard here that is QWERTY, but it continues the counting and cardinality as well as KCC B5, which are on your screen. And again, counting and cardinality standards. So as a teacher in kindergarten right now, I'm thinking to myself, there are quite a few standards that I can choose from counting and cardinality. I will only choose one standard. I have to choose one standard from counting and cardinality collection. So I'm being mindful of that as a teacher, and I'm going to look at my year. I'm going to think about the planning, when certain standards are taught. And I know as a kindergarten teacher that the more informed I am about the best time, the most authentic time to teach and gather work and differentiate within these standards, the more that I do that, the more informed and the more impact the portfolio will have on my practice. I can switch right here to the second collection in kindergarten, operations and algebraic thinking. So in kindergarten, I will choose one standard from counting and cardinality to represent in the portfolio as a collection, and I will choose one of the standards on the scoring guide for operations and algebraic thinking collection. And as I walk through those right now, I see KOAA1 and 2 on the screen. And again, I have 3 additional operations and algebraic thinking standards that I can choose from, as you see here. And I'm just reminded every time I look at the scoring guide, no matter how many times I look at the scoring guide, that my work as a teacher is to really dive into the words, my conceptual knowledge around the standard, and I'm definitely in situations like this will foster community with my colleagues so that we together can really dive in and look at student work. And please know that this year will be a year of support, and we are excited about providing that support through additional webinars and virtual trainings, and so that teachers can feel comfortable and really knowing what each level is asking a student to do, but most importantly, knowing that I can look at the level 3, and if I can understand what level 3 is asking a student to do or say or show, then I am definitely deepening my knowledge. That's definitely going to be the place where I'm going to place the most focus to really understand what it's asking. So again, this this webinar we found online, and these are resources that are provided for you as well, the revised standards, the 10Ls. Again, and the 10Ls math standards, I might have not mentioned that earlier. They are exactly the same as last year. 17-18 will bring about revised 10Ls. And so when we go into the 17-19 school year, there may be some more revisions to the 10Ls to look more like the K through 12 standards. So pause, and if there's any questions that are coming through that you'd like to send to Amanda Armstrong via chat box. If no questions are sent, which a couple are coming through now, again, we just very much looking forward to the journey with everyone, and we know that the more that we think about our instruction, the more we think about our student work and our student needs and strengths. Classrooms will be places where students learn and grow at their pace and in a differentiated setting where teachers truly understand those needs and strengths. So again, we ask you to be ready for that July release date in July. And as we think about that, we've got dates here we want to share. Then on July 14th, that pre-KK ELA scoring guide will be released. Along with that will be a webinar similar to the one today, where we'll take a deep dive into those integrated standards. And on July 17th, we will have the release of the Portfolio Administrative Guidebook and a back-to-school portfolio training. And what I'd like to do is show you this screen right here as we talk in the last couple of minutes about these ports. The virtual training that will be released for districts to use as an option, if they so choose to use it, will really be based on the heart of the portfolio work, the process of the portfolio, and can provide some guidance and scaffolding around constructing standards and short and long-term planning. It will provide some protocols to use, analyze student work, and definitely guidance and support around informing on instruction with differentiated methods for those students. And we'll also provide guidance around the art of self-reflection, which is critical as well, as teachers are going through this process of really prioritizing student work and analyzing it along with their colleagues. And we look forward to being able to be a part of that work with you as districts and leaders and teachers. And please don't hesitate to reach out, again, with any other questions. We appreciate you being a part of the webinar today. And we hope you all have a very nice evening, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks so much for being here.